Hi, this is Catherine, and welcome back to Taking Tea with Catherine. And I'm drinking an actual tea today because I'm filming during the day. It's a rare occasion for us. I'm drinking international breakfast tea from Spice and Tea Exchange. Is that what it's called? The Spice and Tea Exchange. They have a number of shops, I think just in the United States. The particular one I got it from was from San Antonio, or rather, my sister brought me this one from San Antonio. I've been to the shop, it's good. They have all kinds of things, but this particular tea, this international breakfast tea, and I love a lot of the breakfast teas I get from like the UK. I love the Yorkshire Gold very much, but this one, I think there's something about it. Peppery, maybe is the word. Some people don't like that, but I do. I like peppery a little bit over malty if you're gonna go for breakfast teas, and I could say this is one of my favorites, really. So that's my little tie-in to talk about some of my favorite nonfiction writers. And I don't think it's an exhaustive list, and it's not really a ranking. This is not the best to the least favorite. This is just in no particular order. But I thought while we're in nonfiction November, I should just talk about some of the ones that I particularly go for. If I see they've written something new, I've probably got to get my hands on it. So I'm going to start off with two. I call them runners up, sort of, because I've only read either one book of theirs or I'm in the middle of one of their books, and I like it. And I think I would like the rest of their stuff. And then this particular writer, I better, because I got a couple more of her books that I haven't started yet. And this is Cy Montgomery. And this is How to Be a Good Creature. And it's so good. The way it's written, the love of animals, seeing the particular qualities of each animal really makes me want to become a vegetarian. And sadly, I haven't yet. But it's beautiful writing, and I've got a few more books of hers. The Good Good Pig, Tamed and Untamed. I think there's maybe one more. Probably a couple other ones that she's written. So I think I'm on the right track with this one. And I've only I've only read one book of this particular man. I'm sure the rest of his books are good. In fact, there's one he wrote on Ulysses S. Grant that Ulysses S. Grant, I think. Yeah, that looks amazing, and everybody says it is. That I know. When I say everybody, it's like everybody has talked about this book. The one or two people I know who have read the book said it was good. But Ron Chernow. So I read this book. Oh, not last year. I think the year before I finished it. It's hard to hold up because it's heavy. You probably know, you could tell from this picture, that this is the book that Lin-Manuel Miranda was reading, where he got inspired to write that entire, Hamilton play / musical. And I could see why. It's so thorough and enjoyable reading. Sometimes history could be a little dry. Not always. But, and there's even no biography. Anyone could write a life. Anyone could do research. But it's how you write that is important. And I was not disappointed in this big book. And, I don't always want to read a big book because it's such a commitment. I do. No. Okay. I'll put it this way. I don't mind getting stuck in a big book because it could be really great and fun, and just surrounding myself with one particular person's words can be very good. But if it's not well done, then it is a chore, and we don't want chores. This was not a chore. It took me a while, but it was not. All right, moving on. So here's a few people that I quite like their writing. And one is Jenny Lawson. She's written 2 books that I know of and a coloring book. And I think she's got another one coming out. This is, I think, her first one, that Let's Pretend This Never Happened, a mostly true memoir. So it's basically nonfiction. People tend to, when they write memoirs, they can get a little storytelly, but that's okay. It's hilarious. She writes about the struggles she has with certain mental illnesses and physical illnesses, and just dealing with life in that respect, and also taxidermy, which I didn't think I would enjoy reading about, but she likes to collect odd things, and I was laughing quite a lot when I read this one, and furiously happy. And I'm looking forward to whatever she writes next, and I'm also looking forward to the bookshop she's opening in San Antonio that I probably won't get to on my next trip because it's not open yet. But you can't schedule your entire life around a bookshop opening. Or can you? Alright, so here's another one I haven't read in a while, but I've read a few of her biographies, and they were enjoyable, and they made me want to know more about these people, although, well, Jane Austen, I already want to read everything about her. So she wrote a good book about Jane Austen, but the book I have with me right now is one I bought in the UK. Oh, it's a 3 for 2 book. So Claire Tomlin, this is her book on Samuel Pepys, The Unequaled Self. Yes. So I think before I actually read his diaries, I read this. And I like the time period, the Restoration time period in the 17th century England. It's so many things happened. I mean, there's plagues, which I was not so crazy about. The Great Fire of London. Charles II was an interesting person. And everything that was happening during that time period was interesting. And this is one person who kept a diary of that time. And so she chronicled his life very well and the time period. Let's see. Okay, so here's a writer that I have read quite a few of his books, especially his cat books. And I've mentioned him, I think, a couple of times on this channel. This is Tom Cox. He lives in England. For a while he lived in London, but felt he was more suited to sort of country life or village life. You know, he's a big walker in nature and stuff. And this book is his main book, I think, devoted to just wandering around, walking around, seeing things, not so much about his cats, although I love his books about his cats. It's not just about the cats, but it's a lot about the cats. So if you like any of the things I just mentioned, he's very humorous. When he writes about his cats, he gives them each a personality, which, as we know as cat lovers, they do have their own little especially unique things about them. But he does it in such a way that is highly entertaining and very funny. And I got his new book, I think I showed this already, Ring the Hill, and I can't wait to read it, but, you know, I am like drowning in books that I'm reading right now, so, but I will, and I will look forward to it. All right, so here's a writer who is known probably more for 2 of his famous novels, one of which I wasn't that crazy about in school, and the other which I want to read. But I've read mostly, excuse me, his essays. And essays are essentially nonfiction. I mean, they could write a little bit of fanciful stuff in their essays, but generally you're writing about something that's true. And that is George Orwell. This is All Art is Propaganda. It's a collection of his essays. I have another one, Facing Unpleasant Facts. He also wrote Down and Out in Paris and London, and I'm not sure how much nonfiction that is because I found it occasionally in the fiction section. So I'm not really sure if it's what happened but embellished or what happened and misshelved, poorly shelved, badly shelved. I don't know. So either way, he's like, okay, just rewinding. Jenny Lawson, by the way, is a famous blogger too. So that's how she got started in her writing fame, I guess. But he writes, I mean, he died decades and decades ago. But if he had a blog, which I'm sure someone has made, possibly a blog based on his essays, because they did something like that with Pepys' Diary, by the way. They took his entries and posted them daily, which was kind of cool. But he's so thoughtful. He writes about politics, but not only about politics, because I wouldn't want to read only about politics. He wrote about bookshops. He wrote about ideal pubs. Can socialists be happy? Politics versus literature. Lear, Tolstoy, and the Fool. So he writes about writing too in books. And please, if you haven't read George Orwell's essays, if you only read Animal Farm, which is the book I wasn't crazy about, or if you read 1984 and whether you liked it or not, try his essays. They're a little different than his fiction. So whether you like the fiction or not, you might like the nonfiction. All right. Another writer who I quite like up there with Tom Cox as people who write constantly about experiencing life, but this is he writes other things too. He writes about actually so many subjects. He's just a famous nonfiction writer. But as a, Anglophile or Britophile, I like mostly his stuff about British stuff. He's an American who's been living in the UK for quite some time, and that is Bill Bryson. He wrote Notes from a Small Island a long time ago, and this is his more kind of updated, modern, recent version. The Road to Little Dribbling. He wrote this a couple of years ago. I read it before Colin Dexter died. He's the writer of all the Morse books. And He actually does talk to Colin Dexter in this book, so I thought that was kind of cool because it was right before I went to Oxford. So that was interesting. He mostly walks. He does a lot of walk. I mean, obviously, I don't think he walks the entire length of England, but he does a lot of walking. Same thing with Tom Cox, and I love it. I love reading about people walking. It's my thing because I'm a walker too. But even if I weren't, I think I would enjoy it. Just goes to different parts of places. I mean, he also wrote A Walk in the Woods, which is the hiking the Appalachian Trail, which, wow. I I think I did a tiny part of the trail once, and it wasn't really, I wasn't aware that I was on the trail. It was just a hike that I did with some friends, and my poor knees. I'm so lightweight. So I admired that. I admired that. He wrote a book about Australia, which I haven't read yet. He's written about Shakespeare. He's written about the English language. He has a new book out, I think, about the body, which I would love to get my hands on. So, very good writer, and very popular too. I mean, some things got to make him popular, but he's just interesting and funny. I really like funny in writers. Sometimes in historians, I don't need it to be hilarious, but I would prefer. And Lucy Worsley, for instance, I read one of her books, and she should be up there with people I think I'm going to like more of. She has a way of kind of writing in a chatty, not gossipy way, but in the conversational manner that you feel like you're talking to an historian conversationally. You feel like you're taking tea with an historian. A historian? It's not like I know anything about English, huh? But and I do like that, but you don't have to, as long as you're not dry, as long as you can write about something and it's interesting. One of the writers I seem to have read a lot of, and so I must like her a lot, and I don't always agree with her things, but she wrote about The Princess in the Tower. She was very much, spoiler alert, of the opinion that Richard III was to blame, and he may well have been, but I have never had it proven to me either way. Even though she had good arguments, I still feel like it's possible that it wasn't him. So when there's too much of the, I'm sure that it was Richard III that did away with the Princess in the Tower, I can't be sure. But I still like her writing. I liked her book on Eleanor of Aquitaine, and this one is about Elizabeth I, the Wars of the Roses. She wrote about numerous things she wrote about, and that is Alison Weir. I've mentioned her on this channel before because she now writes fiction, and I like historical fiction, by the way, very much so. But I actually think I prefer her nonfiction, even when I don't agree with what she's saying. I just think because you can speculate, but you'll be acknowledging the fact that you're speculating. Whereas in fiction, sometimes she takes liberties with things that happen, and I say, oh, no, that didn't happen. This person never got pregnant, or something like that. But she doesn't do that in her nonfiction. Some of her recent nonfiction I didn't like as much. She had written about some people who were, some women. She writes mostly female biographies of not just the Tudor times, but mostly the Tudor times. She wrote one about Henry VII's wife, Elizabeth, who was Henry VIII's mother, and it wasn't terrible, but there was just not enough source material. So much of it was just writing about things that she might have bought, There just wasn't enough written about women. So maybe I feel like if it would have been a shorter book, I may have liked it more. There was just so much probably in there. She probably this and she probably that. And you're thinking, am I really learning about this person's life or am I just speculating? So I wasn't crazy about that, but I do, on the whole, like her books. So I'm going to put her among my favorites. And last but not least, and again, this is not exhaustive. I will probably later on think of people who wrote nonfiction and say, why didn't I include this person? Oopsie. So, but I think I've said enough already. But, so this is a writer who has a new book out that I want to get my hands on, but I'm already reading a book that I've had for years about tea that I that I have to get going on. So before I spend full price on another tea book that I might not read right away, I'm not going to, or I'll at least wait till it gets a little bit cheaper. Slight discount, then I'll feel a little better about buying it, especially if I'm buying it on Amazon. I don't know, that's just me. But we're talking about Jane Pettigrew. This is one of her books, Designed for Tea. So by the way, people, if you're doing the prompts for Nonfiction November and you want to have something under the prompt design, ooh, 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 ooh. Anyway, so she's written a number of tea books. Obviously nonfiction, tea companions, tea handbooks, tea writing. And I think if I'm not mistaken, I think it is she that had either a tea shop or something related to that years ago in London, like near Clapham. And I think I looked for it and it was already gone. It sounds like a weird dream I might have had, but I think that happened. But yeah, Jane Pettigrew's a tea writer, and there's other people I've liked too. I think his name is Bruce Norwood Pratt. I could have one of those names wrong. He wrote a really good book about tea, and I mean, as someone who likes reading about tea and can't get enough of it, this is great. But what I really like about her is she didn't just write one type of book about tea. She wrote numerous books. So I could really get a lot out of this one person's writing. I don't know if she's written about anything else, because I've never looked into that, because I've only been interested in her tea writing. But you never know. You never know. So that about ends my favorite, at this point, nonfiction writers. I know I'm going to think of other ones, but I'm hoping to add to these not just during Nonfiction November, but in months and years to come. I would love to have even more favorites. I really want to, and I know I've been reading nonfiction for years, but I noticed that there's quite a few writers that I like a book of theirs, maybe one or two books of theirs, but I won't follow them the way I will with fiction writers. Like, when I was coming up with my favorite Victorian writers, it was kind of easy to come up with that, because I would just, you read one, you probably read 2, 3, 4. You just, if they've had that much. But nonfiction, I think I want to get to know individual writers and read more of their things. Why should I just read one of their things and not look into what else they have? Even if it's not a subject that's not my favorite. If I love what they wrote about one subject, I might just at least like what they wrote about another subject. Right? I don't know. Anyway, this has been Taking Tea with Catherine, playing favorites. There's so many more, I'm sure, and I'm looking forward to the journey. Please let me know if you have favorites, and if you've put up videos about that too. I'd love to see that as well. This is Taking Tea with Catherine, in case you forgot. Have a nice day.